As news spread across the school about the pregnant girls, Ben felt increasingly trapped and overwhelmed. He wished his mother was there to resolve this crisis, as she had always done, but for the first time, he was truly on his own. Principal Alu summoned Ben to his office, visibly disappointed and angry. "Mr. Ben," he began sternly, "can you explain how 3 of our students ended up pregnant, with all evidence pointing to you as the father?" Ben's mind raced for an excuse, but he found himself at a loss for words. Principal Alu cut him off before he could respond. "Save it, Mr. Ben. We trusted you with those girls. You were supposed to educate and guide them, but instead you exploited them." Ben slumped in his chair, the gravity of his actions finally sinking in. "What's going to happen now?" he asked, his voice quivering with fear. Principal Alu's voice was icy as he replied, "I've already informed the National Youth Service Corps. Your service is terminated effective immediately. The legal consequences will depend on the girls and their families, but rest assured, you will face the repercussions of your actions." As Ben left the office, the once friendly hallways now felt hostile, filled with accusing stares and hushed whispers. Returning to his quarters, Ben felt a deep sense of dread. He realized his mother was not there to shield him from the consequences this time. With shaking hands, he called her. "Mom, I'm in serious trouble," he confessed, his voice cracking. His mother, Alice, expressed concern, but her voice shifted to disbelief and disappointment as he explained the situation. After a tense pause, she instructed, "Come home right now." As Ben packed his belongings, he hoped his mother could somehow fix everything. However, a nagging doubt told him that things might be different this time. When Ben arrived home, he was shocked to see his mother waiting on the steps, looking disheveled and distressed, a stark contrast to her usually composed appearance. Alice did not embrace him as she usually would, but instead stared with a mix of disappointment and fear. "Come inside, Ben, we need to talk," she said gravely. Inside, Ben noticed several suitcases packed by the door. "Mom, are we going somewhere?" he asked, anxiety rising. Alice sank into an armchair, looking aged beyond her years. "Sit down, Ben. There's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice heavy with weariness. Ben sat, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. "Whatever it is, we can fix it. We always do," he said, trying to stay optimistic. Alice shook her head slowly. "Not this time, Ben. This time we've lost everything." Confused and panicked, Ben pressed, "What do you mean, everything?" Alice took a deep breath and revealed, "I made a terrible investment, a scam. We've lost all our money, Ben." His world seemed to crumble as he absorbed the shock. "All of it, but what about your businesses, the properties?" he stammered. "Gone," Alice replied hollowly. "I had to sell everything to cover the debts. We're bankrupt, Ben." The reality of their situation hit Ben like a ton of bricks. He realized the severity of both his and his mother's predicaments. Their world of privilege and impunity was crumbling, and for the first time, Ben faced the real consequences of his actions without the safety net of his mother's wealth and influence. This stark revelation forced Ben to confront his responsibilities and the impact of his behavior on others. As they faced these harsh realities together, Ben understood that the path to redemption and rebuilding would be long and challenging, but it was a necessary journey to make amends and learn from his grave mistakes. As the scandal of the pregnant schoolgirls spread, Ben found himself overwhelmed and isolated, a stark contrast to his life filled with his mother's protection. For the first time, he was facing a crisis alone. Principal Alu summoned Ben to his office, his face etched with disappointment and anger. "Mr. Ben," he said sternly, "can you explain why 3 of our students are pregnant, and it seems you are responsible?" Ben tried to think of an excuse, but for once, he was speechless. Principal Alu didn't wait for an answer. "We trusted you with our students. You were supposed to guide and teach them, not take advantage of them," he continued, his voice filled with disgust. Ben felt the weight of his actions as he slumped into the chair, realizing the severity of the situation. "What's going to happen now?" Ben asked timidly. "Your contract with the school is terminated effective immediately," Principal Alu declared. "The legal consequences will be determined by the girls and their families. You will face the repercussions of your actions." Ben left the office in a daze. The corridors that once echoed with friendly greetings now felt hostile, filled with silent judgments and accusing glances. Returning to his quarters, Ben felt a deep sense of dread. He realized there was no easy way out this time. Shaking, he called his mother, Alice. "Mom, I'm in serious trouble," he confessed. Alice was shocked and deeply disappointed as Ben explained the situation. When Ben arrived home, he was shocked to find his mother disheveled and distressed, a stark contrast to her usual composed appearance. Alice didn't greet him with a hug, but instead looked at him with a mix of disappointment and fear. "We need to talk," she said as they went inside. Ben noticed several packed suitcases by the door. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked nervously. Alice revealed the full extent of their crisis. "Sit down, Ben, there's more to discuss," she said as she began to explain their financial ruin due to a bad investment. To make matters worse, she had learned about the scandal from the school. "The school called me, they told me everything about the girls and the pregnancies," Alice said, tears in her eyes. Ben tried to explain, but Alice stopped him. "No more explanations, no more excuses. Do you realize the lives you've ruined?" For the first time, Ben saw genuine anger in his mother's eyes. It scared him more than anything else. Alice informed him that the school was pressing charges, and the girls' families were suing them for everything they have left. "But you can fix this, right? You always fix everything," Ben pleaded. Alice let out a bitter, broken laugh. "Fix it, Ben, don't you understand? There's nothing left to fix. We have no money, no influence, we're ruined," she declared. As they grappled with this reality, there was a loud knock on the door. Alice stiffened. It was the police. Ben's eyes widened with fear. "The police, Mom? What do we do?" Alice straightened her clothes and said, "We face the consequences of our actions. Ben, it's long overdue." The officers arrested Ben on charges of sexual misconduct with minors. As the police car drove away, Alice watched, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Ben." She collapsed on the front steps of the house they would soon have to sell. Her empire crumbled, her son facing jail time, and she was left with nothing but regret. Back at Delight's secondary school, Joyce, Beauty, and Precious sat in the principal's office with their parents. The atmosphere was tense, filled with anger, disappointment, and fear. Mr. Alu apologized for the betrayal of trust, but Joyce's father angrily noted that apologies weren't enough. "Her daughter's lives are ruined," he stated flatly. Beauty's mother tearfully questioned her daughter. "How could you let this happen?" Beauty sobbed, "I thought he loved me." Precious, usually outspoken, sat silently, her hands protectively over her stomach. Mr. Alu reassured the parents that the school would support the girls, including arranging for them to continue their studies from home, ensuring their education would not be disrupted by the scandal. As the weeks passed, Ben sat in a holding cell, reflecting on how he ended up there. His life of privilege was over, and he was left to face the harsh realities of his actions, no longer shielded by his mother's influence. An old cellmate, witnessing Ben's turmoil, remarked, "You're going to wear a hole in the floor, young man." Ben stopped pacing, overwhelmed by his predicament. As the news of the pregnancy spread, Ben felt trapped and helpless. He wished his mother could intervene as she always had, but he was on his own this time. Principal Alu summoned Ben to his office, expressing disappointment and anger. "Mr. Ben," he began, "can you explain why 3 of our students are pregnant and you are implicated?" Unable to find an excuse, Ben felt his usual charm desert him. Principal Alu continued, "We trusted you to guide and teach these girls, not to exploit them." Realizing the gravity of his actions, Ben felt overwhelmed. "What will happen now?" he asked. Principal Alu replied sternly, "Your contract is terminated, and legal actions will follow depending on the decisions of the girls and their families." Walking out of the office, the once friendly corridors now felt hostile. Ben returned to his quarters, realizing the severity of the situation. He picked up his phone and called his mother, Alice. "Mom, I'm in big trouble," he confessed. Shocked and disappointed, Alice felt the weight of the situation as Ben explained. Upon arriving home, Ben found Alice visibly upset, a stark contrast to her usual composed self. She didn't embrace him but said, "We need to talk." Inside, Ben noticed packed suitcases. "Are we going somewhere?" he asked. Alice revealed they were bankrupt due to her bad investments, and that she had learned of the school scandal. "The school is pressing charges, and the girls' families are suing us," Alice disclosed, her voice trembling. Ben pleaded for a solution, but Alice expressed hopelessness. "There's nothing left to fix. We've lost everything," she declared. As they faced the grim reality, there was a knock at the door. It was the police coming to arrest Ben for his misconduct. As the officers handcuffed him and led him away, Alice watched, devastated by her own failures and the consequences now befalling her son. Meanwhile, Alice moved into a small, dingy apartment in a poor neighborhood. Struggling to pay rent and buy food, her life had taken a drastic turn from the days of lavish parties. One evening, her old friend Amina, who had warned her about spoiling Ben, visited. Amina offered support, and as they talked, Alice admitted her regret over her parenting. Amina comforted her, suggesting they take things one day at a time. Months later, Ben's trial began. The courtroom was packed with media, the families of the girls and onlookers. Ben, no longer the confident young man, appeared sunken and defeated. Alice, supported by Amina, watched nervously from the gallery. The judge addressed the court, and Ben, through his lawyer, pleaded guilty to all charges. A gasp escaped Alice as she realized the full extent of the fallout from their actions. As the repercussions of his actions unfolded, Ben faced the gravest crisis of his life alone. Principal Alu, profoundly disappointed, terminated Ben's contract and notified him that legal actions would follow. Walking away from the office, the once friendly halls now echoed with the harsh judgment of his peers. Ben, overwhelmed by his isolation and the consequences of his actions, reached out to his mother, Alice, who was equally shocked by the revelations. Arriving home, Ben was greeted by a disheveled Alice, a stark contrast to the composed figure he was accustomed to. Alice revealed their dire financial straits, compounded by Ben's actions which led to their downfall. She explained that they were bankrupt, their assets liquidated to cover bad investments, and now they faced legal charges due to Ben's misconduct. As the authorities arrived to arrest Ben, Alice could only watch as her son was taken away, her efforts to protect him all these years having ultimately led to his undoing. In jail, Ben realized the depth of his missteps. An older inmate, Emeka, pointed out that Ben had never faced real consequences before, noting that he couldn't rely on his mother's wealth or his charm behind bars. Meanwhile, Alice moved to a small, run-down apartment, her life of luxury a distant memory. She struggled to make ends meet, a far cry from her former opulence. During this low point, her old friend Amina visited, offering support and reminding Alice of the warnings she had once given about spoiling Ben. This visit highlighted Alice's failings and sparked a determination to change. Months later, Ben's trial began. In court, the victims, Joyce, Beauty, and Precious, shared their painful stories, recounting how Ben exploited his position for his selfish desires, leaving them to face unintended motherhood and shattered trust. Ben, overwhelmed by guilt, publicly acknowledged his guilt and expressed a desire to atone for his actions. The judge sentenced Ben to 10 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 7, emphasizing the betrayal of trust and the harm caused to his students. As Ben was led away, Alice, supported by Amina, faced the press outside the courthouse. She accepted her failures both as a mother and as a mentor to Ben, vowing to make amends. In prison, Ben began to genuinely reflect on his actions and their impact. He realized the necessity of changing his ways and learning from his mistakes. Alice, meanwhile, started a small business to regain some independence and to contribute positively to society, a decision motivated by her need to rectify her past mistakes. Years passed, and during one of her visits to the prison, Alice and Ben had a heartfelt conversation. Ben was surprised to see his mother, who now displayed a resilience and strength he had never known in her. They talked about their new lives. Alice shared her modest success. Ben sat across from his mother, Alice, in the visiting area of the prison. They had just finished discussing how Alice was managing her new business when Ben spoke up again. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I know it's not enough, but I want you to know that I understand now. I see what I did wrong, how I hurt those girls, how I let you down," he said, remorse evident in his voice. Alice reached out and took her son's hand. "I'm sorry too, Ben. I failed you as a mother, but it's not too late for us to learn from our mistakes. It won't be easy, but we can try to be better," she responded with a mix of sadness and hope. As their visiting time came to an end, Ben asked, "Will you come again?" Alice nodded affirmatively. "Yes, I will. We have a lot of work to do, you and I, but we'll do it together," she assured him. Meanwhile, Joy, Beauty, and Precious were adjusting to their new lives as young mothers. The school had allowed them to complete their education from home. One afternoon, the three friends gathered at Joy's house, their babies playing on a blanket nearby. "Can you believe it's been 2 years?" Beauty asked, watching her child crawl. Precious, watching her own daughter, replied, "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago." Joy sighed, "I wonder what our lives would be like if, things had been different." "We can't think like that," Precious stated firmly. "What happened, happened. We can't change the past, but we can shape our future." Beauty, looking at her friends, smiled. "When did you get so wise?" she asked. "Motherhood does that to you, I guess," Precious replied with a grin. As they watched their children play, the three friends experienced a mix of emotions: sadness for the childhood they lost, anger at the man who had wronged them, but also hope for the future they were building for themselves and their children. Joyce picked up her daughter, hugging her tightly. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" she murmured. "Yes," Beauty answered softly. "We're going to be okay." Precious nodded in agreement. "We are survivors, and we're in this together." The three young mothers held each other and their children, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, strengthened by their bond and their resolve to overcome the past. The story closes with a reflection on the lessons learned and the paths forward for both Ben and the young mothers. It echoes the wisdom found in the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not depart from it." This verse underscores the importance of proper guidance and the impact of one's upbringing on their future actions and decisions. Ben's journey in prison and the young mother's resilience highlight a tale of mistakes, redemption, and the enduring hope of forging a better path despite the odds.